Hello everybody, welcome to a new season of RP-1 with the brand new Soul Beta. Last week's episode was my first look at it and covered how to install it, and I mentioned that I would be starting new, utilizing this new graphical mod, which is in beta, so there may be bugs, so be patient with it if you install it yourself. But nonetheless, we have a typical RP-1 install with a few additional mods that I like to have. A couple IVA mods, I may play around with that. And we decided to play around with a wind mod. I'm not sure the full capabilities of it, but given the fact that we now have volumetric clouds, I decided that we will indeed do the X-Plane program this time around. And because of that, I decided to give myself a little bit more of a challenge, aerodynamically speaking. And we already have FAR installed on here, so that should be quite the challenge. But nonetheless, I'm excited to get back in the air once again, get our pilots up and flying. And so we are going to take the X-Plane research. Unfortunately, it only gives us fast. I guess it understands that it's going to be a near impossibility to hit the X-Plane program at breakneck speed, given the technology you have. So nonetheless, we are going to have to supplement it with the early rocket development, but that's not a problem. That's pretty simple. Basic standard suborbital rocket program. But nonetheless, we're going to grab X-Plane research at fast, and that gives us the ability to take the early rocket development. Unfortunately, we can't grab breakneck, which I typically like to do, so we're just going to grab it at fast nonetheless. Today we are, I initially wanted to have our first flight of both the sounding rocket phase and the X-Plane phase today, so I did build the plane that we're going to utilize. However, I decided I am going to dedicate that to its own episode. I feel like I can make a few improvements on the plane before we get there. So today we are going to focus solely on the sounding rocket phase, at least the first two contracts in the program. We are going to be doing downrange kilometers soon enough as well. And then I'm not sure if I want to do the light satellites program or the heavy satellites program. I've had a lot of fun with the heavy satellites program, but I feel like the last couple times I did myself a little bit of a disservice and locked myself out of certain things by pursuing that and spending so much money per rocket by having that very Kerbal mindset of overbuilding everything. So I'm going to try to do things a little bit differently here. Hopefully I can manage a little bit better. I would love to see the moon, in person. I would love to get an astronaut out there landed. I would love to try to land using collision on the moon rocks that we have to deal with. So ultimately, that is the goal for this season, is to visit the moon with a human. So, but as any good rocket program must be, before we can make such a leap, we have to take a few steps, and for that we are building our very first sounding rocket. We're using the U-1250, because I did like the performance of that, but I haven't quite mastered the Soviet solid rocket boosters, so I am going to use the Tiny Tim instead. But we are using the VAB organizer with the RP-1 configurations on it at the advice of a very beloved member of our community, so thank you very much with that. I have been very much enjoying the organization of it. It has thrown me off. I've developed such a habit of where all the pieces are, but now I can see not only what each piece will do, but the country of origin and its design. So it's very cool. I appreciate it. Anyways, I've just been kind of talking through it. It's a basic sounding rocket design, with the exception that I like to use the the 400 millimeter diameter as opposed to the 300 that is in the wiki, and that is because I like to use the 400 diameter tanks in the X-Plane program as well. So by having them both tooled to relatively the same degree, they will be a little bit cheaper. You don't have to tool two different types. We aren't going to be able to upgrade the rocket at all until we have our better research. So there's no point in designing something too fancy right now. We just want to make something cheap, get the science that we need, complete the contract, and go. So now in almost every single one of my RP-1 episodes, or series, except for probably a few at the very beginning, I've been giving this disclaimer that I have some sort of glitch and that my wings won't look like yours. But again, thank you to the information by the commenters in this community. But apparently that's an update. That is standard. That's actually intended to have those pre-made shapes instead of the large flat rectangles that I've been used to. So thankfully today's disclaimer on the wings is that there will be no more disclaimers, because hey, that's a good feature. I approve. So now with our center of lift below our center of mass, there's nothing else left to do but name it and test it. We're gonna go ahead and get ourselves into the morning. However, it would be good to equip the thing with some electricity. So go ahead and add that, change its shape again, and then we'll go ahead and throw that back out onto the launch pad for a test. There's no real need to show the test here because we are going to actually do the real mission a little bit later. So I don't know if you noticed, but I adjusted the length of the fuel tank earlier, so that did set our center of mass a little higher, which is why we needed to adjust our wing shape. But this time we need to do it for a little bit more control, because it just didn't have enough grip on the aerodynamics, and that might be a cause of the wind mod. I have noticed a little bit of stray from the pro grade in my launches. So now it was successful enough. I'm pretty happy with it, so I'm going to go ahead and hit up the painting GUI. And so we're going to go with a light blue and white theme this time around. I still might do some gold for the probe cores in some later designs, but at least for the sounding rocket, I kind of like this airy design, a little homage to the Volumetric Clouds and their appearance now. We're going to name it the SR00. I'd like to keep a very simple naming convention for now, just to keep things organized. Even though we don't utilize him today, I'm going to go ahead and show you that we hire Reinhold Krauss for our pilot for his low stupidity and high courage rate. I think that's a perfect amount for our X-Plane program. So in the next episode, we're going to show the plane building process and some of the flying, so we will see him soon enough. But anyways, let's go ahead and hop back in. I've time warped a little bit. We now have the ability to build this rocket. We're going to tool it. We're going to unlock all of our parts and add it to a launch complex that we had already put in. We do need to hire the staff in order to build at the launch complex, so we're going to go ahead and hire the max amount, which is 10. Throw that on there. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to the launching process. So our first launch will be at the 31st of March. We are going to warp to sunrise, and we're using the early bird mod, which thankfully is compatible with Sol Beta, and that allows us to launch a little bit earlier in the morning. I think the warp to morning is a little late in the day for both stock Kerbal and RSS in total, so the early bird mod allows us to get these nice golden hour shots, which will be pretty cool with the volumetric clouds, because the way that the shadows play on that can be very interesting. I feel like I could have waited a little bit more, let the sun rise a little bit higher, a little bit brighter on the screen, but nonetheless, we've got plenty of time. I am very excited. I've tested a few missions already, and the Firefly mod, the re-entry heating effect that has recently gone from a Patreon version to a free version, and just looks absolutely stunning in stock Kerbal, is now fully compatible, and that is one of the benefits of Sol Beta, is the Firefly, the Parallax Continued, and the Volumetric Clouds integration just makes it gorgeous. Anyways, we are getting a little bit more sunlight as we go higher and reach that, and as we flip around, we see the fluffy white volumetric clouds bathed in the early morning light. It's gorgeous. So our apoapsis is 117, falling a little bit, but nonetheless it will be able to reach the Kármán line. Well, that's not the true Kármán line, but the Kármán line contract of 100 kilometers, and will be pretty good. It's not quite suborbital yet, but that will be in the next launch. But there's nothing else left to do. We're gonna grab our science. Again, thanks to another commenter who mentioned that their first launch typically includes the parachute, just to save up some fun, save up some science. And I just never really thought about that. I never really thought about the fact that it was available off the first launch, that we can include a parachute on the first rocket. We didn't just have to let it explode. So thanks for that. We're gonna try to save a few more things. But with that, we have solved the very first 2 contracts. We're ready to go. Our Space Gazette looks great, but I remembered in the last series that we could actually rename it in the RP-1 settings here. So we're going to go ahead and name it Legion News. It took me a second to think of news. I was going to go Gazette or Times, whatever, but just news. We're going to use last screenshot, and hopefully we'll be able to remember to take something nice for the papers back home. But now it is time. We've got 9.4 science, and we need to spend it wisely. I'm going to go with the material science to get lighter weight fuel tanks and service bays. We're going to need better science, so we're grabbing the early tracking systems. I would love to grab early science as well, but given that we are doing a plane run, we're going to need supersonic flight as soon as possible in order to keep up with the growing complexity of the missions there. But I realize we'll probably want the supersonic flight a little bit sooner, so we're gonna put it above material science. Unfortunately, I do like having material science as soon as possible, but we need to keep our plane program going. For our first leader, we're gonna take Valentin Glushko primarily for the cheaper researcher salary funds. In the last season, the one that we did just before this, I started to run into a wall of science, and I just started to lock myself into a way that I couldn't continue. So I want to make sure that that doesn't happen and our researchers are adequately paid. But now comes the second launch, the suborbital return. We have our parachute, we have a good launch. We say goodbye to our Tiny Tim, and then look forward to another early morning sunrise. As you see here, we have a little bit of a tilt to our trajectory, and that is not due to anything else except for the wind mod that pushed it over when we changed our mass and separated from the lower stage. Beautiful. There's no integration for weather effects like the rain on Earth or the dust storms on Mars, snowstorms at the polar ice caps. However, there is a good fog effect, which I found pretty enjoyable. But this is a beta, so that means it's a work in progress, which means that in the future there's a possible chance, I can't speak for anybody, but there's a chance that we'll see some pretty wild things come here. Anyways, we are now collecting our science. We are not going to be able to solve this contract. Our apoapsis is 117, which will just simply not do for the 140. And no matter which way that I pushed it, this particular build of a sounding rocket just isn't powerful enough. We are going to need to upgrade our engine for that, or lighten our tank, or figure out something else, but it is just not going to suffice. So unfortunately, this will be a mission failure, except for the fact that we will be gathering a considerable amount of science for it. So no launch is a failure, as it teaches you something every single time. Look at that. Gorgeous. Anyways, we have a safe descent, and that means that we'll be able to collect the science without a problem. So we're going to go ahead and continue on. We're going to live with the consequences of this. It takes up the time and resources, but we do learn valuable lessons and get some valuable science. So, and we would have had to kill time in order to unlock the higher technology necessary to reach the higher height anyway. So there's really no harm in taking the loss here. And so for the final part of the episode, since we're not going to deal with the X-Plane programs till the next one, I'm just going to show you the test flight footage for the Sounding Rocket 01, which includes the upgraded engine and thusly a little bit more fuel, a little bit longer burn time, I think a slightly less mass, and a little bit better ISP. So this will be one of the launches that we do in the next episode, but we're probably not going to focus as much on it as we will on the others. Maybe we'll just start off with it whenever we end up building it, but because of the fact that we're going to need to utilize our time wisely, rather than just time warping in order to the actual launch of this, decided to share with the simulation footage. And so I think I might do that a little bit more if there's a simulation or a particular simulation that teaches us a lot or offers us a little bit of a time advantage to show that instead of the mission, instead of rushing the mission, basically. But as you see here, we officially reached a suborbital trajectory, and all we have to do is return home safely. So we'll have to see that and make sure that this capsule can do that, because if it can't, then we're going to have to figure out some way. We don't have SRBs to slow it down. We don't have access to heat shields. We don't really even have access to control it to point it any particular direction. So ultimately, simulate, and then you won't be as disappointed later. But look at those textures. Gorgeous. I am very excited to start up this season. Having something like Volumetric Clouds made flying so much more fun in stock Kerbal, and actually inspired me to do a whole lot more planes and space planes and things like that. I popped out my joystick for a while. I was flying with that. IVA makes it great. So I'm really excited to see how that translates here. I decided to add IVA mods here, so hopefully they work well and are compatible. We may even do some IVA flying or space flight. But anyways, that is where I'm going to leave today's episode. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you're looking forward for more Soul Beta. If you did think about subscribing, drop me a like, let me know your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next one. Take care.